Welcome back, everybody. We apparently have a wrestling fan listening. He said of Eric is Kenny J and my Scrap Iron Gadaski. So we were talking off air how those two guys were like fall guys. Their job was to make the other wrestlers look good. So anyway,
I'll happily take that title.
A little bit of there you go. Yeah, Kenny and Scrap Iron. So joining us now, we've got Stephanie Fox on out in Washington D.C. And Stephanie, welcome to Afternoons Live, and thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for having me, Perry.
And I gave you a little intro earlier in the show, but you're a native of Breckenridge. You're a cowgirl. And your dad, of course,
Yeah.
Tim, he's famous as the state's attorney, city attorney for many, many years down there. And so would it have been your great-grandma that had Veda's Steakhouse down in Breckenridge for us really old-timers?
That's it. That was Veda Steakhouse, absolutely. My great-grandma.
Yeah, I remember when I was a little kid. So, okay. So, Stephanie, the reason we're having you on today is to talk a little bit about the situation over in Israel and Gaza. You lived there for how long, Stephanie?
Yes, I had the pleasure of living and working in Gaza for 5 years with the United Nations and then in Israel for another 7 years.
And these would have been about what time frame, Stephanie?
I went to live in Gaza in 2007, and then I came back here to Washington, D.C. in 2019.
Okay. And then you also did you say you lived in Israel for a time as well?
Yeah, I was there for 7 years in Tel Aviv.
Okay. Now, what is real quick, what is the history of the Gaza Strip? We've all heard about it. I know it's not a large area, but if I'm asking you something that you're not versed to answer, I apologize, and we can, don't worry about it. But
yeah, no worries. That's a really long story. I think way longer than our time here. But
okay.
I do have some things that I think would be, interesting to share about the Gaza Strip for your audience. Before I went over there, I had this image in my mind of, a small strip of land, which is true, but it's, filled with a bunch of bad people that want to go kill other people. And so when I was offered a job over there, I, had some hesitancy, but I figured I should still go and do it because I could make a difference. And boy, was I relieved to find that the images I had been shown in the news were not the situation at all. Gaza is filled with the most lovely people. You know what? Actually, it kind of reminds me of the people of the Midwest, so hospitable, humble, welcoming, willing to give you everything. I worked with the most amazing people. They're super educated, wanting to positively contribute. And so that was the first great thing I saw about the people of Gaza. The other thing that struck me, and you just wouldn't really think about it until you're there, is just how normal people's aspirations were. To find a good school to send their kids to plan a birthday party, to find the perfect gift for their best friend, to go to a wedding. In fact, some of my greatest memories of my 5 years there were going to weddings and dance parties and celebrating life with my colleagues. And that, I think, is something that really gets kind of lost in all of the news coverage of Gaza and Israel is the humanness, the normal, everyday humanity of the people there.
And is it safe to say that the average resident of Israel and the average resident of Gaza get along just fine?
Well, they've been living side by side for, decades and decades. Unfortunately, for a couple decades now, Gazans have been unable to leave Gaza, so they lost that connection with Israel. They've been living under blockade, but prior to that, Gazans used to go and work in Israel. They'd go to their jobs in hospitals or wherever. There was this mutually beneficial economic situation where Gazans their major economic exports like agriculture and furniture all went to Israel. There's a very, there's close ties there. which has sadly been cut off. And when you get cut off from people, then this, it tends to breed fear, and it's going in the wrong direction.
So you indicated, correct me if I'm wrong, that the people of Gaza really couldn't leave. Is this, and forgive me if I'm a little ignorant, but is this as a result of the Hamas organization kind of taking control?
Well, they are living under economic and movement blockade. So
Okay.
they are not, for example, right now, there are so many people just looking for a safe place, and they're unable to flee to Israel. They're unable to flee to Egypt. Nobody can leave. And even prior to this war, they are living under an economic blockade where very limited numbers of goods are allowed in and out.
How does that has to have a huge impact just on their daily lives if they can't. Let me back up. It sounds like prior to this whole conflict that they were struggling to a significant degree just to get things. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, for sure. Mm-hmm.
Okay. By the way, you must still have a lot of friends that are over there. Are you in communication with them regularly?
Yeah. Every day I wake up to more and more messages from my friends and former colleagues there, pleading for help. They're, like I think 80% of the population there now, they fled their homes 2 months ago seeking safety and have been moving from place to place trying to find that safety. And they're, I'm sure many of you in the audience are parents, and as parents, you know how important it is to be able to provide for your kids. And right now, with the situation, they can't even provide for their kids the most basic necessities. Like when their kids are hungry, they have nothing to offer. When their kids are cold, they don't have a blanket to offer. There is a huge humanitarian catastrophe unfolding, and they're really at their breaking point. Just this morning, I got a message from one of my friends who used to live like in a normal house like you and me. He was happy to finally secure a tent and a square of land to put the tent on. And then the rains came 2 nights ago, and now his tent is flooded, and he's back on the streets with his wife and 2 kids. It's a really desperate situation.
This sounds absolutely tragic. We see the images on TV, and it's one thing to see those on TV, but I just can't imagine living there. I saw this apartment complex in New York City where a corner of it kind of crumbled down, and it was a huge deal. And you're seeing entire buildings over there just laying in piles of rubble, entire blocks. And I just don't, I just can't imagine it. So, Stephanie, we need to take a little break. Can you stick around with us till close to the top of the hour for another 15 minutes or so?
Absolutely.
Very good. We're visiting with Stephanie Fox. She's in D.C. now, but lived and worked in the Israeli Gaza area back in around 2007. So when we come back, we're going to visit some more. If you have any questions, we've gotten one in on the text line to 35270. Or are you okay with taking a phone call if one comes in, Stephanie?
Absolutely, yes.
Call us at 237-5948. We'll be right back with Stephanie Fox on Afternoons Live. Welcome back to Afternoons Live. Perry Miller sitting in for Tyler. We're visiting with Stephanie Fox, a native of Breckenridge, Minnesota, lived in Gaza back in the mid-2000s. Stephanie, we had some questions coming in. One of them said, asking about how do they even have cell service to communicate? I mean, you see the pictures on TV, and it looks like everything is just obliterated.
Yeah, it's very sporadic, and this is actually something I was happy you asked about this. There are eSIM cards that some companies have been gathering donations for, and I've been sending these to my friends there that seem to be working. However, they only work at certain times and in certain parts of the Gaza Strip. It's very sporadic, and you just have to keep trying and get lucky. Sometimes you get a signal, sometimes you don't.
Okay, Eric and I were talking off air, and I know that there's people listening that want to help the average person over there that you described, the people that just wanted to have a birthday party for their kids and were good people, and we were curious. Could you even Venmo them money? I mean, can they even access it? What if somebody wanted to help? How would they do that, Stephanie? Do you know?
Right. So I appreciate that question. Thank you so much. There is so much help that is needed. But right now, even if you Venmoed somebody some money, there's nothing to buy. There is nothing on supermarket shelves. There is nothing anywhere to even purchase. What the average Joe can do to be most helpful right now is to urge our leaders to do whatever they can to end the violence, or at a minimum, don't stand in the way of other countries in the world who are trying to end the violence. And in fact, I asked my friend before this call, I'm like, what do you want me to tell them? And her answer was very simple: help us save our children by ending the violence.
Yeah. Wow. Another question comes in, Steph. It's more of a timeline question. They're just curious if you were there when Hamas was in power in Gaza.
So I went in right after they took power in 2006, I believe that was, and I arrived in 2007.
Okay. So right away, it wasn't too bad, I take it?
Well, that's when the blockade started. It was when there was still, things, there was still exports going into Israel. There was still an economy. And I was there during the time when all of the factories, all the furniture factories, all the farmers, everything kind of, went under because they could no longer export their products. I was there when they used to, the fishing industry used to be a huge industry there as well. By the way, in case your listeners are still thinking about the Spencer, the meat guy from before, I was thinking about how delicious the fish in Gaza is. It was amazing.
Interesting. Very fresh, I'm sure.
Absolutely. And that used to be a huge industry that also went away with the blockade. So it was really during the first years that I was there that the economy started to decline, and you would have people who are very educated, so educated. I remember standing one time at a food distribution center, and the guy picking up a bag of flour had a PhD in chemical engineering, and he's standing there picking up a bag of flour because the economy had been crushed.
Wow. That is just hard to wrap your head around to see, almost like the depression that we saw in the early 30s here in the United States. It almost sounds like.
Exactly. That's exactly what it was like.
I'm going to ask a question, and it might be sort of above our pay grade. But what's the solution to this? I mean, from you that kind of understands what's going on there, what do you see as a solution, Stephanie?
Well, like I said, first and foremost, we need to end the violence. One of my favorite quotes is from Benjamin Franklin, who said, "There never was a good war or a bad peace." And we need to really heed that advice right now and do everything we can to make that a reality. Secondly, we have to help have people's basic needs be taken care of. And then thirdly, this is a longer term solution, but we have to realize that violence is not the solution to this situation. It is a political solution. And as we're dealing with these days of war and in the aftermath, we have to ask ourselves, what kind of, experience are people having that will or will not make them be in the mindset for peace, right?
Right.
Like we have to move away from this idea that violence can solve this conflict and towards a political solution. And what would facilitate that political solution? And it's when people have their basic and psychological needs met, that is what is going to help facilitate a political solution.
Right. Stephanie, I can't tell you how much I appreciate your time. My heart goes out, as I'm sure the listeners does, to your friends that are over there. And we can just hope and pray that this ends soon.
Thanks, Perry. And I just also want to say, getting back to your earlier question about, Israelis and Palestinians, that I got so many phone calls and texts from my Israeli friends and I continue to do so, them asking me about my friends in Gaza and how are they? How are they doing? What
Right.
can they do?
Yep. Yep.
So you're right. I have friends on both sides of this terrible conflict who are looking for a humane solution and who are genuinely concerned about each other. So it's good for all of us to keep our humanity in the forefront, especially during this Christmas season.
Right.
Yeah.
We're about out of time, Stephanie. I appreciate it. If you can stick around, I want to talk to you off air a little bit, but we'll be right back on Afternoons Live. Perry Miller sitting in for Tyler.